Afternoon. I will call to order this regularly scheduled Community Development Committee meeting of the Metropolitan Council. It is January 21st, 2025. I'm Councilmember Robert Lilligan, the chair of this committee, joined by a healthy quorum of the committee for tonight's meeting, so we can do the region's business. The first order of business on our agenda is approval of the agenda, and unless committee members have changes or amendments, we can consider it approved. We have an agenda. Next is approval of the minutes from the January 6th, 2025 Community Development Committee. Is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Bento. Discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. And then we will move.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Councilmember Bento.
Before you start, I just want to let folks know that I'm going to need to leave by 6 or a little after 6. So I have a hard stop.
Okay.
So,
we will try to express efficiency in government today.
This is from a virtual meeting last Wednesday.
And so folks, ready to move on to the non-consent agenda. We have one multifaceted item. It's a joint committee item. It's item 2025-3. It's to accept the public comment reports and, thank you, adopt Imagine 2050, including land use policy, the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, and the 2050 Housing Policy Plan. And I'm going to correct myself. We actually have another non-consent business item. It's adopting the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, which technically isn't a requirement of this body, but since it's something new and staff has worked very innovatively on it, we want to see it. I just have two number ones on my agenda. Cool. So 2025-3, Director Barajas, you're kicking this off?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of the Community Development Division, and I'm joined by my colleagues who I'll let introduce themselves.
Angela Torres, the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance.
And Sarah Berke, Senior Manager for Housing and Livable Communities.
And Emmett Mullin, Senior Manager for Parks.
Great, thank you.
So today we'll talk a little bit about our overall engagement approach. We'll talk about our focus for 2050 and a summary of key changes to the different elements of Imagine 2050 in response to public comments. And we'll go through section by section with each of our presenters today. And then we'll get into that proposed action. So in this round of regional planning, we really focused on a community-centered approach of engagement in addition to the studies that we regularly produce either annually or on a longer cycle. We also built out a more robust network of working and technical group of representatives from local governments, organizations, and other stakeholders, ranging from regularly meeting ongoing groups like the Regional Planning Advisory Group to shorter-term focus groups and engagement series on various topics. You see that in the gray bar on the right. The green bar really centers on our community-centered approach. And on the left-hand side on the blue, the numerous studies, reports, and other ways of engagement that we bring information to the whole decennial regional planning process. As we've talked about before, and new for 2050 in this process was a really key process change for the Metropolitan Council, and that was working on a concurrent cross-divisional long-range plan. In the past, a certain element of the plan would be produced. In the past, it would have been Thrive MSP 2040 first, and then the systems and policy plans following that over the course of about 1.5 to 2 years. And so we had some disconnected policy language. We had things that we learned later in the process that wasn't reflected earlier in our plans, and comments from members of the public, from our local governments that were on individual components of the plan that would say, well, what about if we're talking about transportation, what about land use over here? We're like, yeah, that's in that plan over there. So really thinking in this process how we pull that all together and how we create a comprehensive plan, regional development guide at the same time together internally, as well as sharing that, what we're learning along the way with one another across the council. from our various engagement approaches, from the different conversations that we're all a part of, and ensuring that our policies work together towards advancing the shared goals that you've identified in the plan. Another key process change in this section or in this cycle was making 60% drafts available in May of last year ahead of the public comment period. Those 60%, or in many cases almost 90% drafts, were the result of all of these conversations and iterative conversations where different policy language was shared along the way and updated and revised along the way. So by the time we got to sharing those 60% drafts in May, we were able to use those as another method of engagement to receive comments, to incorporate new feedback, to engage with our partners, implementing agencies, other local governments, and community groups that we had previously connected with. So by the time Imagine 2050 was released for public comment officially in August, we had already been engaging on earlier versions of the draft language, and for many, there were not a lot of changes along the way, or surprises, I should say. So you'll see on our timeline, which you've seen before, we're on that January 21st date on the right-hand side on the top there, and then moving to a shared action in February that brings all elements of Imagine 2050 together in front of you. So to get us started, as you all know, in this process, new for 2050 is a new regional vision of a prosperous, equitable, and resilient region with abundant opportunities for all to live, work, play, and thrive. And as a part of that, those 5 regional goals around which the entirety of Imagine 2050 is organized. These regional goals build off of what we've heard throughout all of our engagement. We heard a lot of support for those and alignment with those goals through the public comment period as well. As a part of 2050, as I mentioned before, we were really centering resident voices and experiences in this work, and that resulted in developing equity frameworks to guide our planning process across all of our elements. So key changes in response to public comments in that introductory language, the vision, values, and goals document, are what I had shared with you previously at our meeting in December. They really focus around incorporating and summarizing incorporating first the land, water, and people acknowledgement as recommended by the American Indian Advisory Council, as well as including a summary of the organization of that advisory council and their meetings, and a summary of the types of commitments that are seen throughout the chapters of Imagine 2050. Each of those commitments that are chapter-specific commitments will be found in those chapters in more specificity, but at that front end, wanting to set that stage of what the reader can expect to see and where they can expect to see it. We also included new language in the introduction on the successes and great things about the Twin Cities region, the successes around regional planning, the things that make the region great, and really expanded upon the impacts and how widespread they were of the COVID-19 pandemic and how every population was touched in some fashion. We spent a little bit more time talking about planning for and the importance of planning for the aging population and for populations living with disabilities. We included updated language around civil unrest and disparities as a result of conversations that council members Wolf, Chambliss, and Carter had in the interim since we last met with you in December. You'll see that. Shoot, I don't remember the page number off the top of my head, but in the beginning section in the landscape of the region, just after figure 1. And then we spent some additional time more clearly connecting the inequities of the past to present day practices. We added examples within the community-centered engagement framework. We spent some time reorganizing and streamlining the emissions reporting to make it more easily legible. That's in the Relied on Climate Change goal. And then that includes updates to the transportation targets that MnDOT sets for the region regarding transportation that they had come to talk to the council about in December as well. And then we added language regarding state shoreline rules and other existing environmental protection rules that we missed in that process. Overall, across the entire plan, we made changes to charts and graphs to really, for consistency across the plan, updating data and updating forecast information and making conforming changes with the proposed changes to community designations as well, where that relates to how we map things or how we chart things to make sure that those numbers are correct. As you heard from Todd Graham at a committee of the whole in December, we also had comments from local governments on local forecasts, 25 from local governments and 5 from others in the region. 2 of those were comments of agreement from 2 cities. We had 4 cities that didn't have a specific forecast request and public comment, but they had some questions and comments as well from 5 Metro residents. We also had some comments, including comments that included a forecast request and that council staff disagreed with. So we only made minimal adjustments to those that included 4 cities and 2 county governments. And then for comments that included a forecast request, we included adjustments for 13 cities. And then other discussion that we had outside of the public comment period, since we're regularly in conversation with local governments, included minor adjustments for 7 additional cities. So all of those full and final forecasts that Todd had talked to you about in December are included as an appendix, as Appendix A to the vision, values, and goals that you'll see posted with the agenda. And next, I will turn to Angela to discuss the land use section.
Director Barajas, would you prefer to stop after each section if there are questions or comments, or should we pull out that to the end?
Why don't we keep going? I don't think we have too much, and then we can take questions and comments at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you.
In the land use policy, our development on Imagine 2050 really took a people-centered approach as well, as Lisa mentioned, really intentionally elevating the voices of underrepresented communities, considering their feedback in equal measure and considering the individual experiences within the built form. We took a comprehensive view of land use in that beyond orderly and economical development, land use policy really needs to meet the physical, social, and economical needs of the metropolitan area. Our primary approach was to work directly from the 5 regional goals to ask what would it take to achieve this goal. That includes a responsible and respectful approach to growth management, which requires a lot of balance between the perspectives of many partners and stakeholders, aligning need with opportunity so that people can live within proximity to the options that meet their needs, focused on restoring and building community connections, which community told us repeatedly was harmed as a result of the pandemic and which hasn't recovered. We moved from natural resources to natural systems, valuing nature for its own sake without prioritizing the extractive value that it might provide. In alignment with the Council's desire to lead on climate, land use policy used an environmental justice lens to focus on adaptation and mitigation measures that are possible through development practices. We also looked at how land use policy can work through equitable development practices to both acknowledge and remedy historic discriminatory land use practices. And finally, land use policy supports the economic health of people and connects that with climate change by fostering a green economy. Based on our analysis of local 2040 comprehensive plans, we built on that foundation with a land use inventory, scenarios planning, community designations analysis, forecast, development trends, and density analysis. These all informed the broad changes that you'll see in land use policy. You might remember me saying 1 or 2 times throughout our work that compact development happens in all community types, and more efficient use of existing infrastructure ensures that we aren't prematurely planning for capital improvements or service expansion. The broad changes include integration of American Indian perspectives in planning for land management and growth, reintroduction of previous planning tools like rolling land supply and use expansion criteria, updates to residential density and transit station area density expectations, emphasizing the protection of agricultural and rural areas while also respecting natural systems for their own value. Community design through through universal design, design that doesn't require modification, and within the MUSA to allow for a diversity of housing types in all residential districts, taking what we learned from our engagement strategies into the local planning process, building capacity for communities to engage in governmental planning practices and processes, integrating new statutory climate requirements via land use and development practices, and supporting actions towards a more just economy. So key changes in response to public comments. Content changes include updates to community designations and maps for 16 communities, further clarification of the council's support for orderly annexation agreements, and that we don't encourage land patterns that prevent future urban services in unincorporated areas or patterns that are incompatible with adjacent jurisdictions. Added clarification on the approach to administrative guidelines that support implementation of land use policy, added back in provisions for what we call MERCA communities, but Mississippi River Critical Corridor Area communities to be consistent with Thrive, added a roles and responsibilities section as well as an implementation section. And for context and clarity, kind of throughout, we clarified language and policy intent, the roles and responsibilities throughout, using tags referencing Met Council or local governments to be clear about areas of responsibility. We've reduced duplication and ambiguity, really trying to simplify, clarify, consolidate where needed, and in some cases providing examples to clarify policy intent. We added context to descriptions for urban and rural service areas to clarify the role of rural centers. We added context to each of the descriptions for community designations, as well as the objective narratives to make sure that every policy and action was covered in the narrative for the objective. We clarified planning concepts or terms like human scale, living streets, complete streets, universal design, and others, really to make sure that there is clarity in what some things that from a professional planner would understand to what a lay person reading the policy plan might understand to provide clarity there. We also clarified statutory expectations specifically for historical and cultural preservation, aggregate resources, and climate policies, sometimes adding in statutory references where public comments were unsure where that came from. We clarified that local governments will be setting renewable energy strategies, not the Metropolitan Council providing those for local governments. And we strengthened connection between environmental justice within our equity objective by also consolidating mitigation measures for displacement within that objective as well. And I will pass this on to our housing policy.
Thanks. Yes, so the Housing Policy Plan chapter for 2050, there's a lot that's in common with the 2040 Housing Policy Plan. This plan focuses on the development and preservation of housing and especially affordable housing in our region. But this plan also really goes based on all the feedback, the engagement, the analysis we've done, and the experience we have had as a region over the last decade. This plan goes beyond just the topic of housing supply, and it focuses on housing that actually meets the needs of residents. So looking at affordability, stability, quality, ownership, choice, environmental justice, and connection to cultural and neighborhood amenities. So you'll see 7 very focused objectives and policies on those topics throughout the plan, really seeing housing as a foundation for health, social, and economic well-being in our region. Something to preserve and something to get better at. So the actions in our plan are divided very clearly into 3 Ps, what we will provide directly at the Met Council, what we encourage in plans and guiding local government's planning efforts, and what we will partner on to help meet our commitments with others in our region. We received a lot of feedback throughout the process of developing this plan that we want to be really clear about how the plan translates to local government work and local planning efforts. And so we added a section this year that wasn't in the 2040 plan around implementation, and we'll follow up on that with even more detailed guidance once this is final. And cities have given us very good positive feedback on that throughout the last several months. Some other things that are new, you'll see a more focused future affordable housing need allocation, working at 60, 50, and 30% of the area and median income in terms of how we define the need for housing in every community in our region. We are going to support local planning for addressing all the needs that residents have expressed to us that they have in the region, looking at what the current gaps are, not only at what the need is in the future, looking at shelter and aging and home ownership and preservation topics, and providing more data and resources so that cities can plan effectively in those areas. We're asking communities to identify their top 3 housing needs and be very specific about those and how they can address those with specific tools. And we are providing, again, resources on the tools that will be appropriate for addressing different needs in the region. And we're focused on not only asking cities to guide land that could be potentially developed as affordable housing, but also encourage them to implement policies that will actually support development of affordable housing. Receiving the public comments was really a gift. It was great to hear from all the people who care about this work and heard a lot of very positive feedback, a lot of good questions that made us think deeply about what we had put in the draft plan. And we made a few changes in response to those comments. The American Indian Advisory Council met, and we incorporated those commitments that you've already heard about with that group. We refocused some of the proposed actions in the plan away from things that we will require and toward technical assistance and tools that we can provide to help communities plan. So on homelessness and shelter, on homeownership, and many other specific topics. We expanded our consideration of some relevant topics that hadn't been in every element of the draft originally and made sure that we included consideration of manufactured housing, of NOAA or unsubsidized affordable housing, of water efficiency and not just energy efficiency. And then one very specific thing you'll see in the proposed action for today in the business item is to authorize us to finalize the preliminary allocations that you see in Appendix B of the Housing Policy Plan chapter. That's the future affordable housing need by local jurisdiction, and we have a calculation of that allocation in the version that you have before you today. We are still finalizing and double checking a couple of those numbers, so just for a timing perspective and for that reason only, we want to make sure we have time to get those right, but we anticipate that what you see here is very close to the final product. And then in addition to those content changes in the plan, we made some changes to the text to add more context, more detail on the kinds of housing choices that residents in our region are looking for, very diverse housing types, types of ownership, sizes of housing to meet the needs of various households in our region. We added detail on the funding constraints that make it difficult for cities to meet their needs. Heard a lot about, well, even if this is needed, how can we realistically respond to that need? We recognize that it's not always possible, but this plan does in fact lay out what we believe the need is as a starting point for the planning process. And as an expectation that cities should plan to meet their need within what's possible. And we added more context and clarification of a number of terms and topics to help planners understand better what we're talking about when we talk about supportive housing and homelessness, what disparities and social determinants of health mean, how that relates to housing, what housing quality and aging housing means for our region. And we clarified some of the requirements for the plans to really differentiate what's a plan requirement, what's a reporting requirement, and what is a need that needs to be acknowledged. That's what I have, and I'll turn it over to Emmett for Parks.
Thanks, Sarah. Mr. Chair, committee members. I wanted to start today just by expressing appreciation to you, the Community Development Committee, and really all council committees for your advice and guidance throughout this process. The Parks and Trails Policy Plan is stronger because of it. You reminded us at the beginning of this process that we have a really strong foundation on which to build, and I think that we took that to heart. I have a short presentation today to highlight the more significant changes and additions that were made to the Parks Policy Plan. To begin with, we're really happy to elevate regional trails to the title of it, so now we call it the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan. I think that's a good change. We continue to elevate the importance of equity in our work, and we've called out natural systems and climate resilience more clearly as a priority in this plan. So let's get into it. Key directions for 2050. So where are we headed with this plan? I'll begin with a high-level overview of the key directions. We've added a new strategic framing to the plan with a Parks and Trails system vision, mission, values, and objectives that nests really nicely under your strategic underpinning. We called out the important role that state and regional funding have in our system since the establishment of this system in 1974, over $1.25 billion of state and regional funding, so really significant. We've enhanced our system plan with a new policy and 3 actions focused on maintaining data, mapping, and planning, and more. We've modified the former classification of special recreation features to special features, and we've added a new classification within that category called the new cultural landscape subclassification. We've added a new natural systems policy and actions, emphasizing the importance of natural systems as the foundation of the regional parks and trails system. And we've added narrative around the council-led system additions process, including calling out the key factors that we use to guide the process. To continue around climate resilience, we've emphasized the council's commitment and role in supporting climate research, agency coordination, and public awareness. For the long-range planning section, we've streamlined the planning requirements into 3 groupings around engagement, the development concept, and natural systems. And we've clarified the long-range plan amendment types. Finally, for system protection, we simplified and clarified the land conversion language. It remains largely the same, but just more clearly stated. For recreation facilities and programming, we integrated and strengthened equity throughout this section, including establishing more flexible criteria for recreation facilities eligibility. We strengthened the council's commitment to better coordinate the regional trail system with the regional bicycle transportation network, as well as other ways to make our bicycle and pedestrian systems more seamless and accessible. In the finance section, we summarized and clarified the statutory requirements. We consolidated them and put them in the front of the finance section just to be really clear about where there's no discretion and then where there is some. And we formalized the council's commitment to the Regional Parks Equity Grant Program. We increased the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund program cap from $1.7 million with Parks and Trails Legacy funding to $2 million, and from $1.7 million to $3 million for the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund program. One big addition is adding an action to regularly analyze our council's regional funding strategy, looking for ways to increase support for the system. And we updated the 2025 to 2028 work plan, section 9 in the plan, setting up plan implementation over the next 4 years. So excited about that. This is my last slide. As the subheader notes, the plan was strengthened by public comments, by agency comments, and by council committee comments, both during the formal public comment period and before it. As Lisa mentioned earlier, there was a 60% draft of the plan back in May that people took really seriously. We got great comments and feedback from you, from MPOSC, and our regional park implementing agencies that really served to strengthen the plan. And then for the public comment draft, what we called the 90% one, but we carefully considered every comment that we received and we responded to all of them. And we're confident that the 2050 Parks and Trails Policy Plan will serve to advance what you laid out as our regional vision and goals. To highlight just a few of the changes made as a result of the public comment, we enhanced the connections between our Parks and Trails Policy Plan and the brand new planning handbook that you'll hear about in just a minute. It's the next item, as Chair Lilligren said. That contains the more procedural and administrative processes. We integrated and updated graphics to more clearly depict trend data, including park visitation and funding. We elevated the importance of better serving our region's aging population and those with disabilities. We refined and consolidated the long-range plan requirements, mentioned that earlier. We clarified the land conversion criteria to ensure we adequately protect our parks and trails. And we added language supporting agency efforts to reduce barriers to access. We elevated equity in the future of regional trails in the plan space. And again, with comments from the park implementing agencies and the council committees, we strengthened this important trail coordination section. And finally, we refined and added items to section 9, our work plan, our 4-year work plan, including the American Indian Advisory Council commitments. Finally, at our January 9th Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, which met earlier this month, they noted that, wow, we've accomplished a lot, and yet there's still quite a bit of work to do. I think they were both excited and like going, whoa, that's a big work plan, but mostly excited. So with that, I'll now turn it back over to Lisa to continue. Thank you.
Barajas.
All right, before I jump into the proposed actions, I wanted to just share for the benefit of committee members and anyone listening that on our agenda you will see posted the public comment reports for each of the sections, as well as the introductory Imagine 2050 overall public comment report. That will be essentially the cover section for the entire public comment report for the regional plan. And that includes response to comments, as Emmett had noted, for all the comments received, as well as a summary of the engagement results from our online platform that we had that were sort of Likert scales and other types of rating systems, so you can see that in there as well. You'll also see both a strike-through version of each section of the plan as well as a clean version, if you will, for legibility purposes, especially with some of our reorganization and some elements of our plan. We understand the strike-through version can be hard on the eyes and hard to follow. So you can see both of those for each element of the plan. And then within our business item, I also wanted to note it, that you'll see a more detailed summary of changes as attachments 1 through 4 at the end of our business item. We provided a summary of the summary, if you will, today verbally, but that then brings us to our proposed actions in front of you, which are that the Metropolitan Council accept the public comment reports for regional vision, values, and goals, land use policy, the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, and the 2050 Housing Policy Plan as components of Imagine 2050. Number 2, adopt the regional vision, values, and goals, land use policy, the 2050 regional parks and trails policy plan, and the 2050 housing policy plan as components of Imagine 2050. Number 3, adopt the local forecast through 2050 as shown in Appendix A of the vision, values, goals component of Imagine 2050. And number 4, authorize staff to finalize the preliminary allocations in Appendix B, future affordable housing need by local jurisdiction of the 2050 housing policy plan for inclusion in the final document for council adoption. Before I turn it back, I want to note that at our last committee, as you are all aware, the Community Development Committee directed staff to provide a framework for response to public comments for different suburban edge density options. You can find that in Table 2 of your business item, and they are also here on this slide. The proposed actions with the business item are inclusive of Imagine 2050 as written, with 4 units per acre for that suburban edge density option. Should the committee wish to revise that number, council staff present both a framework that you see on this page for adjusting our response to public comments for any related comments, as well as proposed amendment language in the staff report, starting on page 3 and going on to page 4. So with that, I'll turn it back to the proposed action and thank the committee for your time, and we'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the team that's sitting up here for all of your work, those that are sitting here in the chambers as well. Yeah, I think you should. I mean, that's just tremendous. And then all those who aren't here as well. You do us proud. So we have the report, we have the proposed actions. Councilmember Lindstrom was requesting the floor, and then Councilmember Vento.
I would, Mr. Chair, move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. So the motion's before us. Questions, comments, discussion? Councilmember Vento.
I should probably wait with this, but I'm not going to. Page 74 of the housing proposal, Sarah, missing Woodbury. It's not in the Washington County
The
list.
table ends with Stillwater.
Okay, so page 74 is which section? Sorry, the allocation of need?
Can we get?
Yes.
Okay, we will correct
Allocation of
that.
need in the housing policy.
Yeah, thank you, council members and chair. We will correct that, and the allocation of need, as we said, we're recalculating it still as it's related to specifically allocating growth in sewer serviced households, and that's a different calculation on top of the overall projections and regional growth. So that'll be a good time to double check all of those numbers and make sure every city is included. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reiterate what you said earlier, the calculation, we're giving direction to finalize the calculation of allocation of affordable housing, right, as part of this, so we can continue to move this forward as one document. And good eye, Councilmember Vento.
really
I can't even find page 74 yet.
Mr. Chair, it wasn't my eye, it was Councilmember
Very
Wolf's.
good. Good eye. Good eye. Councilmember Wolf. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been getting sort of conflicting information about the 3 versus 4 issue, and I was told by the regional administrator that staff would be okay with whatever we decided as a body, but I've heard from other people that staff would be dismayed, angry, not, feel betrayed if we changed it. And so I just wanted to get that out on the table, because if that's part of people's thought process, I want to know where we stand.
Oh, Director Barajas.
Mr. Chair, council members, this is a policy decision for you all to make, and we will implement the policy that you all direct us to adopt.
And I'll just flip that up as well, Councilmember Wolf. I mean, in my conversations with Director Barajas, Regional Administrator, they're very clear where the staff piece sort of ends and where the policymaker decision part begins. So I'm not feeling that resistance, at least at that level, so.
Mr. Chair, just to that point.
Yeah, please,
Thank
Councilmember
you.
Johnson.
For that, I wasn't prepared to talk about anything like that, but I do want to say that some of us had advocated earlier, and I'm bringing up something we've talked about before, but we won't be talking about it much longer, so we're going to go one more time. that we did want some more meetings as it relates to 3 and 4. And I commend Mr. Chair. He was there early on and agreed that he thought it would be productive. A lot of us certainly did. And I received pushback in my conversations with the regional administrator that that wasn't, going to happen. And we've been asking for it and asking for it. And so I don't know, in my role as an appointed official, I'm used to being an elected official, where the buck stops with me. I don't know where the buck stops here, because I think that when a number of us are trying to bring something forward that is now tonight still, I think, a wrinkle in a decision-making process in a really big document that has a lot of great work in it, that here we are. So I would just simply say, I too sometimes wonder how far we can go in our requests. And I know that Mr. Chair even said, well, I don't have the role, I'm paraphrasing, Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't have the authority as a Met Council member to direct staff. I have to work with the chair and the regional administrator, which is correct. But when a body is hand-wringing the way we have been for months and months and months, from day one of the work group, when we talked about compact development, when we talked about densities, when we've talked about concerns, when we put them on poster boards and all the things, I am still very concerned about the 3 to 4. So at the last meeting, I first of all want to thank staff, because we did come to a consensus to bring this, these options forward. And if we move forward tonight with something as recommended to council, although I think council should look at all of this, because I'm sure full council is divided as we are, perhaps. Unless people are counting votes ahead of that, then I could be wrong. But I appreciate that you've brought this forward tonight so we can have discussion about it. And I appreciate the language that you've used in these options. So I will bring this up later, but just simply to the point of, is there a hard stop where, we don't have input with staff, or if we do want something different, will there be, tensions? As a staff person myself within an organization, yeah, I've been in meetings where I'm like, I wonder if they read page 17 or, and people are busy. So I don't expect them to be perfect either, but I get to a degree what you're doing, because in my day job, and I love my board, by the way, and my committees, but I get it, they are trying to do their best to bring ideas forward that I might not have thought about, or I might have thought about, but needed another perspective. And I have to remember that every day, that is their role, to help me be better. And so this feeling, if there is such a thing, and I'm not discounting that there isn't, I think we're going to get through this, but I think post all of this, it might just be good as part of our culture work, and I brought this up too, that the council itself have a piece of culture work in how we work with each other and how we work with staff. Because even if within the organization and in the Met Council body, and again, Director Barajas, thank you for your leadership on the culture work. It is a great undertaking, and goes with my huge gratitude, because it was much needed, and I appreciate it. But I think there's a piece that this council also needs to just know, well, what is my role, or what can I put forward, or how far is too far? And I think we struggle with that, and this is an indication of that tonight. So that's my only comment.
Councilmember Johnson, very well put, and I appreciate your bringing that up again. And we have had this conversation, and it's a good one for us to have, right? And in a couple of things. One, just on your comments here. To my role in not being a stronger advocate earlier on for a more sort of robust community process, I will take accountability for that. Now I see, you live and learn. I feel like I spent my whole first term here just trying to figure out where the levers were that I could possibly move, and I guess sometimes I miss them. So I apologize to the committee and to staff for not being a stronger advocate for that. I will really commend you, Councilmember Johnson, and all committee members who have generated some more robust dialogue out in our communities between when we started having this debate and tonight. And that's closer to what I think I had in mind, months ago, and to the best of my ability, I've tried to sort of hold back any decision-making until we could at least do what we could do in this last bit. And, as we move into the final years of our term here. Some of us, it's our second term, some are first, some are
Seventh.
right? But none of us know how much longer, we'll be here, right? But this has been a great learning experience for me. I mean, fortunately, we just do this once every 10 years. So I don't know who will be here in these seats when we head into this the next time, but even on other kinds of issues, and I feel like we are a very strong council overall. We're a very strong committee overall, and I feel like we're learning how to express that leadership a little more effectively. Maybe I'll just speak for myself. I'm learning how to express that leadership a little more effectively and with some clear objectives in sight. But of course, we have to go forward as a committee, we have to go through as a council, that's how this works. But so I really appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the way you went above and beyond. And I was gonna say this, because several of us here have other local government experience, policymaking experience, right? City, county, and it's a different thing, right? At least in my experience, I served in Minneapolis City Council when it was a strong council system. You had a tremendous amount of executive authority. You could tell people what to do. And it's just, this is a very different kind of policy environment, right? It's a more arm's length. It's more, like I said, trying to figure out where those levers are that I can actually move a little, or that we can move as a committee. And so I guess this is just a way of saying thank you to everyone here, not just those of you who have local government experience, but those of you who have stuck with this policy making. But all of a sudden, just looking up and down this ideas, we do have a lot of local government, former elected officials here. So yeah, thanks. Thanks for letting me blab on. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I spoke at length about reasons why I think 3 is the right answer at the last meeting. And I tried to be as factual as I could about my 29 years of experience in planning. And I asked the other council members that were not willing to go to 3 for their reasons, and I've spent all of the time since trying to understand that and understand where it's coming from and find a way to get people to understand what it is that we're really asking for with 3. And I'm kind of at a loss because I know that the staff report says this will advance our goals, but having actually done the work on the ground and having grown up in this area, I lived in Golden Valley and Crystal back in the 1970s and early 80s when they were greenfields, and things were very different for them because you had transit service. I didn't own a car until I was 24, so I'm used to being transit dependent. And when I lived in Golden Valley and Crystal, both times I might have had to walk a little way to get to the bus, but there was a bus that ran all day long. Mm-hmm. And we had freeways. Some of them were in the process of being transformed from at grade with stoplights to a true freeway, like when Highway 18 turned to 169. And 2 of my friends lost their houses to improvements to Highway 100. But the infrastructure was there, and the commitment was there from MnDOT that we're going to provide the infrastructure to support growth. And somewhere along the line that changed, and MnDOT stopped funding projects that deal with growth. And a lot of the outer counties then had to use county money for what would be regional infrastructure. And transit stayed basically in the same footprint until early 2000, mid-2000s. Lakeville was the first community in decades that went into the transit taxing district and was only able to get 2 little one big park and ride and 1 little park and ride, no all-day service. And now we've got a huge amount of funding for transit, but none of that is planned for expanding that footprint outside of the existing transit taxing district. So all of these edge communities that are trying to develop are not only not being a partner with MnDOT on the highway infrastructure, they're not a partner with us either on the transit infrastructure to accommodate development. Yet they're being told you need to do a higher level density than any of those inner communities did. And they have a lot of environmental rules that the earlier communities didn't have, because you used to be able to put a creek right under in a tube and dry up wetlands. And all of those things are now being accommodated by these, but it gives a different kind of development when you have to go around the wetlands and you don't have any freeways. Because you have to, your arterial roads that you do have to accommodate a lot more traffic. So you have long distances between the entrances to the neighborhoods, and then you have cul-de-sacs because you've got those long areas where you can't get onto the main road. But they're all trying to do, or I can't say all, because there are apparently some communities who've just said, we don't want to try even to get to 3 units per acre. And I can't speak for those communities. I don't represent any of them.
Mine all do, just so you know.
Okay. But we're telling the communities who have obeyed all the rules without any infrastructure from us, and we keep telling them, if you obey the rules, it'll come, it'll come. Well, this is my 4th time around the hamster wheel, and it's still not coming. And that's through 2050. I'll be 85 in 2050 if I'm alive. So I'm still trying to understand why some of this committee are so opposed to just leaving it at 3 when communities are doing more than the inner communities did under the same circumstances. Because Golden Valley didn't have to pay for all of the freeways that they have. But any interchange on Interstate 35 in Lakeville, my taxes have been paying for because MnDOT was not there for us. And it was either let people die or pay for it with city and county money. So I'm trying to understand, what can I tell you that would convince you that 3 is okay? Because to be brutally honest, if we go ahead with 4, personally, I would be better off, because it would raise the price of my house. My house is paid for, so I don't have to worry. My 2 adult kids that live in the region already have houses with a mortgage, so their house prices will go up. But I don't want that. I want houses to be affordable for everybody. And doing this to 4 is going to raise the price of housing and give fewer choices and less ability to deal with environmental considerations. The pictures that they showed us in their presentation a couple meetings ago were places that are flat and either didn't have trees or were clear cut before the houses went there. And yeah, you can do that in a lot of places. If you're developing a cornfield, easy. But if you're developing a hilly area with mature trees and you want to keep any of that, and wetlands, you can't do that. I mean, even in my neighborhood, my house is at least 12 feet higher in elevation than the house behind me. There's a lot of hills in Lakeville. And I have a 267 brick retaining wall in my backyard that I built with my own 2 hands. Those things are heavy. They're 67 pounds apiece.
Geez. How many?
And that's why I counted them. And that's not cheap either, trying to make that transition. And so I'm just asking, what can I tell you that would get you to go to 3? Because this is really, really important to me. I am very seriously considering resigning, and that's not a threat. I have given almost 16 years of my life to this place. I make $20,000 a year. I could make a lot more money at, gross. And then I got to pay $3,000 in self-employment taxes across, off of the top. So I basically make $17,000 a year because I don't pay income tax because I'm poor. But I've given all of this time because I thought I was making a difference. And there were two things in this entire giant plan that I have asked for. One was fixing the language around law enforcement, which my colleagues were gracious enough to work on with me, and this 3 versus 4. And if I don't have the respect to get that, I guess I wonder why I wasted 16 years here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, for your frank words, and just personally, professionally, politically, I respect you. I just want to know that we've known each other a very long time, since you were a Lakeville City Council member, right? And so, yeah, so sometimes people disagree, right? But I want you to know, just personally from me, I respect you, I respect your work, you know, I respect what you've done here, and over the years, I've seen it in my shorter time here, 6 years now, that you have made a difference in a lot of things. So I just want to put that out there. I know there's disagreement here, and yeah, I want you to feel respected. You know, it's important to me. Councilmember Johnson, you're, okay.
I mean, I can,
Yeah, go for it.
yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. I'm of the mindset that I'm never going to quit at this pace. I mean, there's so much work to do, and I'm going to keep going. And it's tough sometimes, but I also really came into this is with an open mind as much as possible. Again, having served 20-some years on Plymouth City Council and as mayor, understanding all of the nuances and for sure politically of development proposals coming through my community, going from 50,000 people who are now over 80,000 today. And I will repeat myself, and then I want to get into 2 points here. The suburban edge communities are on the front line of development. We know from the growth projections that were given by the smart people here at the Met Council that development's coming their way and in force. That I will just say District 1 especially, and that is being felt by my communities, certainly. I want these communities to be respected in their concerns. I think there's a genuine understanding that we all want this region to be thriving. We all want this region to be successful. I see city officials working very hard to solve problems, build consensus, be creative, reach out for help, ask for financial support, and all of the things that they're doing. And they, just like us, sign up for this, and it's not easy. I have so many letters here, and I've really worked hard at trying to figure out in our documents where the answers are to the concerns, and I have yet to find that. So for me, I have still concerns and unanswered questions, or maybe the answers my cities don't want to hear in some cases, but as they're bringing up actual difficulties in going from 3 to 4, I'm not hearing where we are with certainty giving them the comfort they need. And I'm just going to recap some things that one of my communities said. Actually, it was Maple Grove, who's still in the going from 3 to 4. They will be a 7 soon enough, just like Plymouth, because they're building and developing and once you get the houses in, and eventually you do get transit into Plymouth and Maple Grove, you all know they're a suburban transit provider, so they've got the ability to do some of these things. The outer edge is not so much. My hope is that they can expand transit services to those communities like Dayton and Rogers and Corcoran and so on. But they don't have that yet. So, the piece of control here is a really big deal for cities. Go figure. It was probably for Minneapolis. It was probably for Lakeville. I mean, it is a big deal. They want to be a partner with the Met Council, but they want to also maintain control. And in fact, in one of our drafts, in the working draft, it says, the Imagine 2050 guides the growth of development, both public and private, in the region. The council sets the framework for land use patterns and guides the orderly and economical development of the region as directed by the Metropolitan Land Planning Act. Absolutely. To be fiscally reasonable. And I think this is what the amended draft language is proposing, that the Met Council works collaboratively with local units of government to guide land uses and development patterns that leverage the region's infrastructure investments and private development to the benefit of all. The old language, though, is still ringing true to me, and that is the Met Council guides land uses and development patterns that leverage the region's infrastructure investments and private development to the benefit of both. I am just really trying to make sure that there is partnership with my communities. They come to the table, they need help. Throughout all of the comments are the technical help that they need, which is not a surprise here, we know that. They have to hire very expensive consultants that make it very difficult for them in their budgets to do this kind of work. They will grow up, they will become more dense, they will look like Plymouth one day or Maple Grove one day. Dayton is getting there, but there's time. So when we say we want them to get to 4, here's the deal, and this was eye-opening for me. They're not even getting to 3. Now, I learned that from Angela, I think, when I won't name the city. We were out on the city, and I was getting a really good education. I'm like, did not know that. In fact, I found out Plymouth got a few developments through over time that were under 3, and I'm like, how did that happen? So here's what's going on. In some communities, the guiding is there, but they don't actually have a zoning district that meets the 3 requirement. So that's an issue. So they can pivot to a PUD. My community loved PUDs because that's where we could create a unique zoning district that was tied to the actual plan that was approved. Any change had to go back to the council for an amendment. So we used that mightily for affordable housing because we wanted it included or you didn't get it, right? And so that was, but I also understand, talking to developers, that some use that and it can be a point of contention with the developers because they want fees and they want this and they want that, and pretty soon development's just economically unviable for the developer and they walk and it sits there, right? Okay, so that's a problem. So in fact, I'm gonna pivot quickly and I'm gonna come back, well, I'm gonna keep going. So there's that. Also with maintaining local control over land use, zoning is crucial to cities. Cities are concerned about the potential loss of control with the new density requirements when they are combined with the missing middle housing legislation that is sitting out there. So imagine you're a community, all of our communities done a good job, I think, overall at planning and making a beautiful place to live, right? So now you've got a bill out there that says, well, we're just gonna say affordable housing can go anywhere in the community. And we at Met Council even had concerns about that as it related to capacity for our infrastructure. So you've got that going on, and then you've got Met Council saying, and you're gonna go to 4. I mean, just throw the baby out with the bathwater as far as in the minds of local officials. I mean, development plans are coming forward. It might be a 3.5, we can't do that, but at the same time, it's not affordable housing. What are we gonna do? Because the missing middle bill is trying to strip our local control. That is how local officials think. Because they have their own plans. They want to add housing. They know there's housing shortages. By the way, people want a little elbow room. People want to have a home with a backyard where you can, throw a dog toy to your dog or pass a Frisbee to your kid. Not everybody wants to be, with 5-foot setbacks or 10-foot setbacks. So there's that. There's a bunch of that is coming out my way. And they want a little more elbow room. There were people that wanted that back in the day, and eventually, in my community in Plymouth, and eventually it tightens up, and Plymouth is putting up apartments now. They just put out a huge report talking about how much progress they're making on the affordability. So there's that. So there's tension out there. And what we have here doesn't give cities much, I think, concrete partnership that what's coming at them they can manage successfully on their end. Also, infrastructure. So increased density requires significant infrastructure investments, as Councilmember Wolf and others have said. So that's water, sewer, and roads. Cities are really worried about the cost of these upgrades and who will bear the financial burden. So if the city pays for it, guess what? It's the taxpayers in that tax pie that are going to pay for it, which jacks up those taxes, which lowers affordability for everybody. I learned that real early as a council member. People like, waive the fees for everybody, waive the fees. Well, you waive the fees and it just, you push the balloon down here and it pops up over here. So they worry about that. Infrastructure is astronomically expensive, just given the environment that we're in, and probably more so, I won't even go into the next 4 years. So then there's funding gaps. A gap exists between the demand for affordable housing and the funding available through Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. Cities are unfairly blamed for the lack of affordable housing when, in reality, many approved projects are delayed due to funding limitations. I have said this time and time again. And we know at Met Council, and I think in one of our LCA reports, we were oversubscribed by $1.4 million in a round of whatever. So it's not that the cities aren't trying, it's just there's not enough money. So when Sarah astutely brings up that we're going to put the housing need out there, but also recognizes they're going to have to do what they can with what they have, we aren't going to meet the need. We're just circling the drain on this stuff. So until there's a demand where we can, a demand and a response where we can get money into the communities to build the developments they want to do that are approved, they're not gonna happen. In fact, in the housing report that I just read from Plymouth, they didn't make the last cut of Minnesota Housing Finance, but they're on the list, and they're hopeful that if you don't make it the first time, they'll get back, and it's 100% affordability. So it's just waiting, and as we wait and wait and wait, costs just keep going up and up. So there's that hand-wringing that goes on. And that's a big deal. Every community I talk to in my district worries about affordability, and especially for seniors, given the baby boomers and all of that are aging up. And really, suburban edge communities want more information on the economic impact of including communities in the suburban edge designation. They want data on population, jobs, business, growth, and I've really said this one, gross metropolitan product and tax capacity. There's just a lot of stuff that cities manage within their own community and kind of as a sub-region together with surrounding communities. I also, last Wednesday, had a meeting virtually with a developer, Jake Wallish, who has been a big developer in the suburban edge community over the years. So, they've been just moving out and out and out as cities like Maple Grove and Plymouth and Lakeville and Andover and Woodbury or wherever we all are starting to, densify, they continue to move out. So Jake was there. We also had Todd and Pat who were with Tradition Developers. I know these developers very well. They're reputable developers. They're honest developers. And the reason he reached out to me, and I think maybe it was via Andover, was that they also recognize some challenges with for the cities, but also for the development community. So what I did tonight was Jake had sent me in advance some of his talking points and data, and I wanted everybody on the committee to get that because he went over this in our meeting, and I thought it would only be right as I bring it up for people to read along. So, one of the concerns he mentioned was many of the suburban edge communities don't have zoning in place, which I've already talked about. And to get to the lot sizes that you need, the density most likely would be, just under 2 units per acre based on what they've got for requirements in those zoning districts. He does say there are some exclusionary zoning practices, including minimum large lot sizes, large setbacks, charging park fees and connection fees for attached units and apartments. So that's something that is fair game to discuss. Many cities without detached single-family zoning to meet 3 units per acre force developers into a PUD. We've talked about maybe some of the challenges developers see with certain cities on that, although I think it's a great tool in other areas. This developer, again, representing multiple developers here, 4 units per acre seems high, and he thinks that it would be hard to achieve for the suburban edge communities due to pipe capacity in some cases, which I believe is Andover's primary concern. And due to city council pushback, I think it may discourage development in certain cities. So, it's something that we have to be careful for what we want, because you can have an equal and opposite reaction where cities go, wait a minute, we're not ready to do this. We are uncertain how we're going to get there. What does this flexibility mean? And they just stop. And ironically, I've heard from some of my constituents in Medina where there's a proposed development going on, and the developer right now is talking about the 3 to 4 issue as he's trying to move forward with a 3 in Medina, and there's a lot of concern. This developer that we met with said that he thinks 3 or 3.5 units per net acre is more realistic, and a minimum plat density requirement would be an effective tool to ensure meeting the minimum average density goal. He also says that he thinks 4 units asks that you designate property for attached units or apartment buildings in places that are not commercially or geographically viable. So I will just tell you, it's normal for first of all, farms to come in, and then homes to come in, and then eventually you do start to get to the attached, and then more so as time goes on, you start to get to those denser apartments, because by now you've got potentially shopping centers and strip malls and convenience places, businesses, for the community to become more dense. And it really supercharges if you have transit and if you have roads that have been improved, which a lot of my communities don't have. The Highway 55 Corridor Coalition goes from Plymouth out to Wright County, and they've been fighting, not even for expansion, just for safety improvements. And so, that's Corcoran, Medina, Independence, Loretto, and beyond. Those are my communities that are like, we just need basic safety improvements. And there's a lot of commerce being conducted in this west suburban area to and from. So that's a big deal. And generally, attached units and apartment units will be feasible, but built later in many suburban edge cities. So I'm guessing that when Plymouth, in some cases, we weren't meeting 3, well, guess what? We're good with 7 in Plymouth right now. And we'll probably be able to go beyond 7 because we are now putting all the pieces together and we've got the infrastructure that we need. And so I believe these suburban edge communities will, in the out years, be able to get those apartments and things that maybe we want them to have now, and that's why they're not meeting their goals overall. But I believe that they will get there. He also thinks that, again, the cities will just, wait out the development until the policy changes, which is a concern for developers. He also had mentioned, too, that in some of the communities in my part of the world, where if he could get 4 units per acre and build at the lot width and depth that you need, the homes would be so expensive to do everything that he needs to do that the market won't accept it. And so they know, they run their numbers. They run their numbers good before they ever put a development and shovel in the ground, right? And he goes, I don't know what we're going to do because the cost would just be so high. So I just wanted to bring some of those forward. And the other big issue that the group heard was really talking about, what can we net out of some of these plats? Because, when you're looking at it on paper, that's one thing. But when you're out in the field and you really look at the gradation and the wetlands and then the buffers, and then some cities like Plymouth have setbacks from the buffers because people like to put stuff in the buffers, and you can't do that. They talk to us about cities that are asking their developments now to require the watering system to come from their wetland or their ponds, their NERT ponds, which I wanted to do 20 years ago, but Plymouth just wasn't there yet. I'm like, what a great thing. We take the surface water, we put it back with all the nutrients and water the grass and leave our aquifers and our contaminated wells or whatever alone. But what that does, though, is require infrastructure to be built all throughout the development. And you have to plan to clean those ponds. And so you can't build in certain areas when all these good environmental setbacks and preservation, pro-environment activities are taking place. And the other thing that we talked about is, at our last meeting a bit, well, I'll start with ponds. So I'll repeat myself, but I'm going to keep repeating myself till somebody understands what I'm talking about. So in Plymouth, we had to follow the Clean Water Act, and it required NERT ponds. Those are those ponds, holding ponds, where the water slowly drains off into the watersheds or the water district. And it became very clear that these were owned by the developments, and a lot of them were HOAs. And they didn't have any ability to go in the 15 or 20 year mark and clean these things out. And we recognized, well, we are at the top of 4 watersheds. So the city, long process, won't go into it, but we finally got a surface water fee and we took those over. We have cities here, though, that are very worried about the efforts that they're proposing to protect the environment and to move in a positive direction with pulling out the heavy metals and the stuff that needs to settle out before the water can run cleaner to the watersheds. Who's going to pay for that? Because they don't have the money to do that. And if the developer comes in, the developer usually doesn't want that to be part of the neighborhood either. So somebody's got to pay for all that. So there's actually concerns that we could do things that would reverse some of the environmental work that cities are doing, because if we force 4, but we need setbacks and tree preservation and wetland buffers and all of that, that you finally have, by the way, nobody subtracts out roads, so that's all included according to the developers and the developable land. What actually do they get to build on? And how do you get to 4 at that point? And then how do you meet the market needs? It's really tricky. So I bring these things up because that is, the real life experience of a developer who is working in these areas. Cities are also concerned that if we, don't, like, I will just say Maple Grove and Plymouth for sure, there are these smaller lots, smaller pieces, like maybe 20 acres or less, or 10 acres. We have to really be careful, does 4 apply there too? Because that's really tricky, because depending on the topography and what you've got, stuff that's left in some of these communities, it's not the cornfield where everything's just flat and beautiful and you come in and nothing happens. It's tricky and you've got development all around you. So that's a big concern. I guess because I don't know what those answers are and I am trying to, go to my cities and go, well, here would what this response would be. We don't have that. And in the meeting on Wednesday, we did talk about, and I thank Lisa for being there and Peter for being there and Robert for being there. We did talk about that Met Council staff, when this is adopted, would go back and work over summer to come up with the things that we're talking about. We can be flexible. We use the word workaround, but that's not a word. That seems a weird word. So it's flexible. But there's so much flexibility that's going to be required that the developer is telling me and the cities are telling me that, man, this is a big red flag for us. I mean, I have highlighted over and over and over again in all of my communities, not one community. Plymouth says, 4 won't impact us, but we've got a little bit of concerns here. But I can tell you that as a community, they also worry about the erosion of local control. Last but not least, I was also shocked. And it takes a lot to shock me anymore. And I get this. Like, we have sat here and comp plan amendments have come through for review and approval. And we have a 3 density minimum right now. And guess what? We have accepted, because I don't think we approved them, or we were approved to move on for them to be adopted, knowing our role, at under 3. And then we have notes as to, and here's what you're going to need to do. Down the road, you're going to have to build more dense and somewhere else to offset it. And I think staff is worried that that is not happening. Well, maybe we should stop accepting and passing on comp plan amendments at Met Council that are less than 3 over all these years. We have a say in this. Let's try to work at 3 and bolster up 3 and help our cities get beyond 3, because I've had some cities here say we can really, with Met Council's help, get beyond 3. I think that's their goal, but we need to know what that partnership looks like. So I'm like, wow, I guess I'm complicit in this too, because I sent something over from Plymouth that was under 3 apparently, and probably some of these environmental things that Jake brought up in the meeting. And on the other end here I am going, oh, well, staff says, and we get it, and they'll take our advice, and down the road they'll do that apartment building or a dense connected townhome to bump it up. But if we're worried that that's not going to happen, how do we fix it? Is it going to 4? No. We have to either hold to 3 now and really push back on why they're going under 3. And I'm guessing they had good reason to go under 3. It might have been some of this environmental, it could have been topography, it could have been infrastructure or whatever. So if we were not complicit, but we were doing our job and allowing cities to go under 3, well then I guess we're in agreement. There must have been something that said they can't do 3. So I sit here today and I, would advocate that we stay at 3 and we review this system and we help these communities figure out how to get to 3 without damaging some of the things that they're trying to do when it comes to the environment. I forgot to mention trees. So we talked earlier about tree preservation. And I will tell you, we have the big woods in my section of the world. It kills people when they see trees coming down. We lovingly called one of the tree advocates the Lorax when he would come to our city council meetings. But, tree preservation also can be tricky, and Councilmember Wolf said it. If you put a tight ordinance down on preserving trees, before a plat comes in, and it's tied to plats, it's tied to development, before that comes into City Hall, if that landowner wants a certain something on their land, they will clear cut all those trees, and I've seen it happen. And we recognize it's a push-pull again. It's a push-pull with the environment and the things we're trying to save. Because if the incentive is to clear cut them before the development comes in, rather than, oh God, now I got to save these trees, and it's money for the landowner, what are they going to do? So this is the stuff cities deal with every day. And I don't think we've answered them. I know my cities want to stay at 3. I do think that we should at least be at 3, but what we've been doing now isn't helping them be at 3, clearly in some cases. So I do not support 4, because I think what we're trying to do in our well-intentioned, ambitious work to reach the important goals across this region is focusing on an area throughout the region, areas throughout the region on the urban edge, suburban edge, that are in the throes of development, trying to figure it out, lack of resources, all the things I've talked about. So, you know, we can march forward with 4, but I think that it will be very difficult for them to implement. I think it will be very difficult for the market that, for single family that will be needed. I think that these communities will one day be putting up more dense housing, but it's single family housing that comes first. I hope one day we can get transit out to these communities. I don't think I will live long enough to see it, but I'll still fight for it. I also want to say, as we've done community outreach, my entire time on this council, I have embraced whatever communities and whoever is coming to be part of this, because it's a big, big plan that's going to impact a ton of people, all of us, people that aren't born yet. It's going to impact people that want to live here, who aren't from here, and hopefully they can come here and aren't prevented from coming here, and you know what I'm talking about. You know, but I have communities here that are coming forward, and I will say they're being heard because they've been letting us know, but we are not addressing what their concerns are. If any other communities came to us and said, we want to be part of this and we have major concerns, I would be listening whether they were my cities or not. Whenever communities come forward and people come forward and said, we have an idea, will you be bold to act? I'm going to just say it. I said, sure, let's go. Let's figure it out with you, not at you, not to you. We talk about not doing things to community. We talk about, you know, not getting ahead of community and telling them what they should be doing. We want to work with community. So I don't believe, in my heart, I don't know that we are doing that with these communities, my communities and the communities y'all represent too. I just am astonished today that we can't figure a way out after a good portion of a year. People have been raising the red flag and waving it and saying this is going to be a problem. And so I'm disappointed, not with the whole plan, just with a part of it, right? Just a part of it, but it's a big part of it. To Councilmember Wolf's point, this is a big deal to local communities. This is a big deal on how they're going to shape their community going forward. And it's going to be harder for them to, I believe, create the communities that ultimately we want them to succeed in down the road. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And just like the community I represented that used to have farmland and large lots on county roads, we got there. But we asked for help with affordable housing. We asked for transit. We asked for Highway 55, which is now, thank God, Met Council has got a group, and we're working on it, that will dovetail into the Highway 55 going out to Wright County. It's just a hard-fought fight every day by local governments. And so Met Council is coming in, telling them what to do. And quite frankly, they're just begging us to listen to them. And I am listening to them. I hope you will also listen to them with me. And I hope we advance a 3 and possibly a 3.5 for the full Met Council to discuss. And I also understand that not everybody sits on CDC. Not everybody has the time to watch all of these meetings on replay. Not all of the members attend the meetings regularly. But I know there will be people on the full Met Council that share these concerns. And I would hate, just like in my 20-some years when we did big, bold things in the city of Plymouth, our staff worked with us and we knew better to put a big, bold plan going forward if it was going to be on a split vote. So we worked very, very hard when we wanted to build the Northwest Greenway, when we wanted to institute taking over the Nert Ponds, when we wanted to build a new park that would have special features and be built for all, when we wanted to build a community center that would be open to all. There were voices in the community that didn't want to do it, but we worked hard so the council would be in support and we could move forward. And this council won't be there on 3 or 4 right now. And I would hate to see that taint what this plan is really meant to do. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the time that you've been given me. I am very, I'm not going to say passionate. I'm just very convicted because along with Councilmember Wolf, I hope you will understand that my integrity is my reputation, and I am here to tell you honestly and be, I guess, a vessel of what these good cities are trying to do. They're not trying to be something that maybe you think they're trying to be that doesn't want to be part of a great region. That's not it. They want what everybody wants. They want a beautiful community for everybody to enjoy. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I urge this body to consider 3 or 3.5 and work with staff to get something that the full council consider other than 4, which I will not be supporting. And I want to feel really good about this whole process because I know how important it is to our region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. And you don't use the word passion, I would use the word passion, and I respect your passion on this and other issues. And I have requesting the floor, Councilmember Vento and then Councilmember Cedarburg, but I also want to say something else about that you just lifted up, and that, I'm sorry. Ms. Bloodhart?
I just want to make sure we have a copy of that document that was passed.
You
out
do.
on the outside table.
I'll go put one out there right now.
I can grab it and do that.
Yep.
Thank you.
I was
Thank you, Ms.
I
Bloodhart.
forgot.
Sorry.
See, I knew we had you here for a reason. But the
I just need the second page.
the other piece, well,
Yeah,
wait till.
thanks, Reba. There. Thank you, Ann.
Councilmember Johnson, there's a few things that have come up through this discussion that have really surprised me as well. And one of them was how many communities aren't meeting their density requirements and how we're complicit in it, right? And the idea is you can defer, adding more density till what happened, till you're in the situation that you're talking about, right? A community's growing. But, so we do have a role in that. The other, and this kind of blew my mind, was the inconsistency in local zoning to the comp plans. And I know from talking to Director Barajas and the regional administrator, we may have some authority, some levers that, that we could use there if we so chose. But in my mind, a community would want to zone to match their comprehensive plans. And I was very.
Just to that point,
Yeah.
some communities are growing and they have open positions and they don't have planners in staff. They work, with professionals. And so, I would say that would be an area of focus that we would talk with them and go, hey, what's going on and how can we help you get to have options for developers to work with? Those are exactly what I'm hoping we can do when we say, let's get to 3, maybe let's get to 3.5, and let's say we won't be complicit and we will try to help them with those zoning districts that will fit within the comp plan. To your
Thank you,
point.
Councilmember. So Councilmember Vento, then Councilmember Cedarburg. Councilmember Vento.
I'm going to be very brief. I want to second and third and fourth what Council members Wolf and Johnson said, and I agree with you regarding the passionate descriptor, Mr. Chair. You're very passionate, Judy, and there's no backing off of that. And Wendy, don't quit. This council needs you. You've got historical background, and you are recognized. I'm going to get emotional here. In your county, for the passion that you have for representing a big chunk of our region that needs to be heard more often and more thoroughly. I just want to comment on the word community. We're talking about housing, but it takes more than housing to be a community. You need schools, you need libraries, you need coffee shops, you need grocery stores, you need gas stations or EV stations, you need fire and police, you need healthcare, you need pharmacies, you need churches, you need places where people can go for all sorts of help. And we're forgetting the pressure that these communities are under to deal with all of those. I have one community that just passed a sales tax increase to deal with a safety facility because it's one of the fastest growing communities in the region, and they did that. And it took an all-out effort by the city, but they did it, and they got strong support from their community. They're also dealing with the PFAS and the water issues that so much of Washington County is dealing with. They're struggling to hang on to businesses. The bigger businesses seem to be pretty resilient, but those smaller businesses in the strip malls, I don't know how many of you drive by those buildings throughout the 7-county regional area, but awful lot of vacancies. And it's not unlike the vacancies we're experiencing in downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis. So it takes more than the houses. The last two things I want to say is, I hope going forward, more than two things. I better be careful or I'll have to go back and say I'm not going to be brief, or I'm going to be brief. I really believe that there needs to be a form of intentional outreach and engagement with the business community, and in particular, small businesses. I think we do a lot with the chambers, the big chambers, but a lot of small businesses may belong but don't actively participate because they don't feel recognized. Those small businesses employ a lot of people. They provide a lot of service. And many times they are the first and the fastest to respond to people in need. Secondly, I hope that we will figure out how to better engage with our aging community. As we've been told repeatedly, those of us in my generation are the fastest growing segment of our region. Transit, housing, all of it is very, very important. And what's also important to the aging community is what we're leaving for future generations. It's the environment, it's the ability to buy a home, it's the ability to feel safe, it's the ability to feel a part of a community. I hope that you've seen the articles recently about how more and more people are becoming isolated and lonely. And I think part of it is because there are so many levels of tension, not just at the national level, but at the very local level. You see it with next door neighbors, you see it in homeowner associations, you see it within school districts and cities where there's conflict. And we've got to figure out a way to bring people together and engage in such a way that it's not you versus me. Let's figure out how we get to we. And I know that sounds simplistic and like a former elementary school teacher, but that's who I am. So I hope that, I hope we're being heard. I don't think we are, but I'm going to be voting for 3. I wish we hadn't had to get to this point. Thank you.
Councilmember, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I know, Councilmember, you announced at the beginning you'll need to leave by 6 or a little after, so just keep that in mind, please. Further discussion, Councilmember Cedarberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, council members, for letting me speak today. I'm just going to say I agree with council members Johnson and Wolf and Vento, but I do want to put in perspective one thing that was briefly mentioned, and I agree with transit that's happening with Washington County. It's a transit desert, so how can we grow when there's no transit infrastructure? And you can just look at Network Now to see that the Gold Line is being put in, and one bus route from Stillwater, and that's kind of it in my community. Microtransit isn't there. Metro Mobility is having issues with running during regular hours to get people because it's all within the federal area, which is the urban core, again, not there. But just let's talk about water, because water, we're coming to where it's, the computers, need water for their little, energy and water, and it's huge for AI facilities. But looking at the north part of Washington County, and just looking at the recent paper article on Hastings, they're short on 3M settlement funds to build a water treatment for PFAS. And so they're short almost $46 million to do water treatment. Now let's move to North Washington County, where White Bear Lake Area Comprehensive Plan is really going to force 10 communities to go from groundwater to surface water. Now that's just not connecting a pipe. That's building treatment centers and treatment plants and additional infrastructure. Well, who's paying for that? Not the Met Council, not the state, but those communities. And so again, we're talking the huge burdens on these communities, and they're saying we need a pause because this White Bear Lake Comprehensive Plan is being done now, and in a couple years there will be a plan in place, and we will know exactly pretty much what's going to happen, how much you're going to have to turn on, how much you're going to have to spend to switch from groundwater to surface water. And it's not reasonable. People don't understand that you just don't change pipes. You have to build treatment plants or hook up, and water rates are going to go up and huge costs. The other thing, Lino Lakes is 42% water. So now we have big, huge stormwater events. So their buildable land is tucked in between wetlands, lakes. 42% is already water. Hugo, which is about 25% water outside of the agricultural area. And if you look on their wetland map, it's pretty much blue. So when they're saying that they're having difficulty developing, they are not cornfields. Being able to plop houses in and build streets in, you're going around wetlands, you're going around buffers. And given these huge storm events, these stormwater ponds are going to have to be bigger, and more infrastructure is planning and is going to be designed to handle stormwater events. That's happening now. And really, none of these have really been taken into consideration or has been part of the analysis on what are the unintended consequences of going from 3 to 4. The communities who are being asked to go to 3 to 4 have told us that this is challenging or impossible. So is the unintended consequence of forcing a 4 going to be no development? I think that's highly likely. Is it going to be leapfrogging out of Washington County? It's already happening. Is it going to happen more? It probably will. So we're going to get increased greenhouse gas emissions because people are traveling down 35E. So I am just really disappointed that this discussion has been going on so very long, and I haven't seen this real analysis of what this really means, and listening to these communities of, I asked back in May, could we take a Hugo and say, if you go from 3 to 4, what does that look like? Could we model it? And I was told no. I was told no. We don't do that. Wish we had done that 6 months ago. Would have been really good. And so I think transit, all the infrastructure issues, but water is going to be really on these suburban edge communities a huge, huge issue, because building what happened 30, 40 years ago is different now due to all the environmental constraints, the water supply, the water disposal. The other thing in my communities, we're at the end of MUSA. Lino Lakes is at the end of the interceptor pipe. All new sewer is going to be borne by the communities, not by Met Council. So the amount of just costs, and like I said before, okay, people, what's a kumquat? It's about the size of a grape. You've got 10 to 15,000 people in Hugo, Lino Lakes, and Forest Lake who would pay for this infrastructure. That's the amount of households and residents up there. Woodbury, we've got 80, we'll be at 90,000 people. So you have a very small population of people who are going to be bearing a huge cost. And I think that has not been taken into account when we're looking at this increase from 3 to 4. So I will stop because I know there's a discussion, but I wanted to include that in the discussion as being very, very important.
Thank you, Councilmember Cedarburg. I appreciate your attending the committee as well and engaging in this discussion. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Chair, and I just want to thank all of the council members for participating in this committee and offering their feedback, your leadership as chair, and the staff that have worked with putting together all the proposed actions and policy plans, done the thousands and thousands of engagement points with people and communities and cities and policymakers. Our 10-year plans are very important. They're very extensive. We look at so many different aspects, which a lot of have been mentioned today, which I think is really good for people to hear from our committee members on some of our challenges, some of our concerns, the feedback that we've had, and the unique profiles that our different segments have. It's really important to understand that so that as we move forward into the next decade, we can address some of the nuances that are occurring for some of the different community designations and community profiles. And I'm glad that at the Met Council, we do so well with information. I know that we will be strengthening our community profile so we have more information to digest as policymakers and also to share with all of our stakeholders. So I'm just glad that we have a chance to have an impact in very positive ways. And where we are challenged, we have the information to meet those challenges. And being an optimist, I think we need to address those concerns and those challenges so that we can overcome them. So I appreciate the feedback from everybody.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that, Councilmember Chambliss, because these concerns are very real. And so I don't have high hopes that over a summer's time, trying to determine what we can be flexible about will be sufficient to overcome if we go to 4. So the unintended consequences you've heard a lot about here today, I think are very real. And I neglected to mention too, thank you I had many of my communities saying that they are car-dependent communities, no surprise. And, they are very concerned about that with the lack of infrastructure. So top of mind for a lot of my communities are the environment, the ability to even get with the developers to make 4 work. I have yet to have a developer in my 20-some years come to me and say, I don't think higher density is going to work. Everybody kind of thinks, yeah, developers want as much density as they can get because they get more money. No. It gets very difficult for this single family developer. Now, he says, yes, there will be attached housing and apartments that we can increase densities. But he wanted to reiterate that in the areas where there's a demand right now, market demand for single family, which we all know, and some of that is for boomers. They're downsizing boomers that still want a little bit of room to roam, right? Emptying out those, 3, 4, or 5 bedroom homes for younger families to move into. Can't build them because the market won't take the price that they'd have to be offered at. Let's listen to the development community. Trust me, I have always felt very pro-development, but I've never sat on the side of a developer going, yeah, let's see how much we can get out of the city. And here's a developer and other developers saying, yeah, this is going to be tough for us. So let's listen to them. Before we put 4 down and feel good because we feel that it's going to help accomplish all of our goals, let's be very careful of that. There's a cautionary tale here in the works. And so for everybody who's set on 4, we're not pretending here. We're not pretending. And I just want this issue to be vetted as much as we can before we adopt it in the next several weeks, because fixing it on the back end is going to be problematic. And there will be other consequences, I'm sure, that we don't even need to get into right now. So I'm really just about, I guess I'm begging at this point. And I'm not shy to beg. My communities, let me say this. The communities you all represent, your communities are great too. And I have supported your communities. In my 20-some years in leadership in the city community, including the president of the League of Minnesota Cities, I had an education when I traveled around the state, and I found out what it's like to be a small town in southern Minnesota or southwestern Minnesota, or a regional center, or a border city with, the Dakotas, and what a hellish nightmare that is when the Red River runs north and it floods your community, or what it's like to be in a little town that's barely hanging on anymore, and you're having your city hall meetings at the corner bar. And this, us versus them goes away. And you really start to go, we are really all in this together, but we really need to listen and understand and bring it home what these other cities have going on. And as league president, that was just so clear to me. I wanted to be an advocate for all. I don't pretend that some far-flung community out there should just go away because their towns, nobody's there and they need all this infrastructure. No, they have needs. They have needs. Small communities have tremendous needs if they're going to continue to exist. So I am not trying to say that my communities deserve something more than all the other communities out there. What I am saying is they should be heard and taken seriously like I do with everything that comes before me at Met Council. And that, isn't hard to do for me. Maybe it's because I've lived in a few different places across the region and I'm like, yep, I get it, yep, I get it. I travel around the world, you're like, wow, look at that. Pretty fortunate back home. Tonight I'm just asking, please hear these cities out. This is not a game. It's not some crying wolf because they don't believe in our bigger goals. It's not that. They believe in our bigger goals. They need our help and recognition on how we can get there. So please support 3 or 3.5 so that we can really feel good. All of us can feel good at the end of this process. It matters.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Mr. Chair, I would move option C because I'd like to vote before Councilmember Vento has to leave.
I'll second.
We already have a motion.
An amendment.
Amending it, right,
amendment.
sure. So the option C is the 3 units per acre?
Yes.
Great. Is there, you second?
Yeah.
Councilmember Johnson? Okay.
Mr.
Do we
Chair.
need more discussion? Yeah, just do Councilmember Johnson.
Could I potentially offer a friendly amendment?
What?
I'd like to bring 3 and 3.5 to the full council.
Well,
And if it's not friendly, don't feel bad.
no, I mean, I would like to see if we can get support for 3, if anybody is willing to change that was previously on 4, or if we're just wasting our time.
Right, and we can, I don't even know what our rules do because we don't usually get very deep into Robert's rules. I don't know if we can even go 2 or 3 amendments, 2 amendments deep.
I'll
But
withdraw
I
my
would
friendly
rather,
amendment to the amendment, but you
yeah,
can
I
do
would
it.
rather vote one up and down and then maybe move to the next, please.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yep.
Just to, under Robert's rules, to explain my amendment to the amendment is that I'm trying to cast a broader set of parentheses
Right.
to hopefully get people to move a little closer to us. I don't even expect that we shouldn't consider 4 at the larger meeting, but I know that there will be people at the larger meeting that also are gonna want 3 and maybe 3.5. If anybody here tonight wants to jump on the 3 bandwagon, super. But 4 is not going to serve our region well. And so I'm trying to build consensus, even though I'm firmly 3. I can move off 3 because I think with 3.5, with whatever staff comes up with in the summer, there's enough breathing room. And then if we work our piece of it, when amendments come through, I think we can have great success in achieving our goals as it relates to density. So that's my discussion around the amendment to the amendment. It sits. It hasn't been seconded, but I put it out there, and I'm happy to withdraw if the maker of the First Amendment wants me to.
Nothing like putting on the pressure.
Well, I just wanted the rationale to be there as well.
Well, I mean, we've heard from Riva, but we've not heard from anybody else on where they're at. For me, in order to make a major change like that, staff has to prove that it will make things better than the status quo. And so far, from everything, I've been trying for weeks here to understand all of the thought processes behind everything, but we've heard nothing about the additional costs to redo plans for a different density or what sort of impact it would have on these communities, and we're treating it like it's just a small technical amendment. I mean, if we stay stuck and you guys are just going to go for 4, then I'm really disappointed in us as a body for not respecting those cities. But I guess I'm trying to find out where we stand.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm getting the impression that it's just going to be voted down and that nobody cares, which is sad for me, but.
So Councilmember Wolf, Councilmember Johnson, I appreciate the direction that we're moving, and we're moving toward action, right? And so from the chair, as the chair, what I would like us to do is Councilmember Wolf's motions before us, we could vote that up or down, wherever that goes. If there's a next motion to come forward, Councilmember Johnson, I'm happy to recognize you for that. I would say it's option B, right?
Yes, and Mr. Chair, if I may, and
Please.
you know how to count votes as much as I do.
Right.
So on 3.5, I'm just saying I'd be willing to do that. But I'm looking to get to something tonight that recommends less than 4.
Great. Appreciate that. And to tell you the truth, I mean, we've had a lot of conversation, and some of the sort of more pro 4 units per acre folks have indicated some movement, and then they've sort of stepped away from that. So I don't really know where the votes are.
Chair,
Yeah, Councilmember Benton.
call the question, please.
Great,
Mr. Chair, point of order, there wasn't a second on my amendment to the amendment, so I'll remove it.
great. Thank you. Appreciate
Back
that.
to the main amendment.
Great. So we have the Councilmember Wolf's motion to amend using option C, 3 units per acre before us. All in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. That fails. Councilmember Johnson, did you want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move option B, move forward to the full city council, or I'm sorry, Met Council, sorry.
It's a flashback.
We don't get to do this many stuff at Met Council.
Because we
so
don't,
I'm
right, this
reliving
is-
my past life. To move forward option B with the rationale that staff has proposed and provided in the comment response framework.
Is there,
Based on all of the additional input that this body has been given, that I hope will be taken seriously, and I know it will be.
thank you. Is there a second to Councilmember Johnson's motion to amend the original action?
Second.
Thank you. Is there discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Please.
I
Councilmember
really
Johnson.
hope this body will give 3.5 a chance. Think about it. If you're a community that gets 3 now, great, and they're trying to get more, because some of that was worded in here as well. 4 is a stretch for them for sure. If you're a community that's not been getting to 3, 3.5 is a really good move, And we will have, I think, some greater success with our cities in doing so, even though they're saying they don't want 4, but it might be a way with the flexibility that staff can come up with over the summer. It might be, something that is more palatable to our cities, seeing not a 4. And at the end of the day, we for sure are hoping to get more than 3. We for sure would hope we could get to 3.5, but it might be in the realm of possible for these communities that have brought forward really serious concerns. So I am hoping that somebody here today who has been in the camp of 4 will hear us out, because at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want there to be development that makes sense for this region. We don't want there to be adverse and unintended consequences, and I can tell you there will be adverse and unintended consequences if we stick at 4. We've gotten that testimony from our communities. So, Mr. Chair, that is the rationale, and I'm begging that somebody on this committee that has maybe been moved a bit can move to 3.5.
Thank you, Councilmember. For the discussion, otherwise we'll take a vote on Councilmember Johnson's amendment, proposing option 3, 3.5 units per acre.
Mr. Chair, roll call vote, please.
Sure. And I will look to Michelle to call the roll. Please.
Okay.
Surprise.
I'm going to start with Councilmember Carter,
Yes.
Councilmember Chambliss.
No.
Let's see, Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Lindstrom,
No.
and let's see, we have Councilmember Wolf
Yes?
and Councilmember Vento
Yes.
and Chair Lilligren.
No.
Okay. The yeses have it. There's 4 yeses, 1, 2.
That motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Great, so we can move on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr.
This is what
Chair.
we'll be, thank you, everyone, for the respectful discussion. Director
Mr.
Barajas?
Chair, you voted on the amendment.
All right,
Did
so
you
we have to vote on
We have to vote on the whole thing.
motion as amended. The motion as amended, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries, and that'll be forwarded to the full council. Thank you, Director Barajas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, well done. I appreciate the respectful discussion and debate. Director Barajas, do we want to move on the agenda? Are committee members up for it? We have the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, and then we had scheduled an information item, but I know there's some pieces of that we need to get to. So Director Barajas, I'll look to you.
I think the handbook would be really helpful because it's an item that goes in partnership with our Regional
Okay.
Parks and Trails Policy Plan. It's a hand in hand. And our housing team asked for 10 minutes for LCA.
Okay, so that's somewhere around another 20 minutes. Do you guys think you can get through this in 10? Okay,
Mr. Chair?
yes.
Just in case I may have to leave before they do get through it, I want to just preface by saying that MPOSC, when MPOSC met, I can't remember, was that last week? Well, whenever we met. We met sometime, but I can't remember. Anyway, it's been a weird month. We did not have a quorum, but there was a robust review and discussion of the handbook. And those in attendance, plus an observer, or one of our members who was virtually present but not able to vote, all expressed strong and unconditional support for the handbook. So it all went through without any opposition or concern.
Great, thank you for that report, Councilmember Vento. Thanks for representing the council and MPOSC. Excellent service. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I would be willing to forego the presentation.
Director Barajas, how many slides are there? I usually have them all counted up in advance.
It won't take long. They're very quick with it. Okay.
Okay. 12 slides. Okay, let's go forward with the presentation. This is kind of a big deal. And I'll remind folks, this doesn't even require action by this committee or by the council, but this is kind of a big deal and it's a new approach. So,
Yeah.
Colin, I'll give you, you're on the clock. Who's starting?
I am Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'll try to keep this quick. But today I'm joined by Colin Kelly and Tracy Kenny, and we're here bringing forward business item 2025-6, which is to establish and adopt the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. We previously met with you on October during a CDC meeting to present our 90% draft. A lot of this presentation will be fairly similar to that presentation, covering the key content that is within this document, but we will also mention any key changes that were made as a response of public comment. Moving on into the overview of the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. We just wanted to recap real quick that this is a complementary document to the Regional Parks and Trails Policy chapter, and it contains mostly just the procedural and contextual language that outlines the policies and actions outlined in the Regional Parks and Trails Policy chapter. So this outlines a lot of different processes, and another thing that is mentioned in this handbook is that there is a clear amendment process for the handbook to be updated. It's proposed to be updated every 4 years, which is the same schedule as the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan. And for amending this, there are 2 separate ways that it will be updated. The amendment process for both of them will be in partnership with implementing agencies and the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. But we also noted a key distinction in the introductory language that substantial changes that directly impact or necessitate implementing agency action will require council approval through a business item, and that resources such as webinars, tools, or any examples for implementing agencies, that will be updated on an as-needed basis as an information item and as things become available. Moving on into the sections of the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, some of the key changes or the new content that is being presented in this document is that overall, the procedural and contextual language from the policy chapter was moved into this document. And another thing that was added was that graphics, flowcharts, and other clarifying language was incorporated to visualize key processes in the Parks and Trails system. In the introduction, we added contextual language that describes the handbook's purpose and amendment process that I mentioned previously on the last slide. And in addition to that, the introduction also contains a key summary of research and engagement that's been done from the Parks and Trails system that was moved from the policy chapter to the planning handbook. In the system plan, some of the contextual language regarding Minnesota's outdoor recreation system was added to this document. And in addition to that, some of the language that was initially in this planning handbook was consolidated back into the policy plan to encourage a one-stop shop for key regional park and trail unit definitions. And then another key item in the system plan is that eventually we will be working to add agency level maps once they become available, which is anticipated to be later in 2025. Now I'll hand it over to Colin to discuss the next few sections.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll be briefly covering sections 3 through 5 on this slide. And next, the focus here is on natural systems and climate resiliency, as you can see on the slide. And in the next, we'll move over to planning. So starting with natural systems, what have we done? What's new, if you will? We've clarified the system additions process. We've added some graphics and narratives summarizing how a regional park search area or a regional trail search corridor become operational in the regional parks and trail system. We've realigned study area criteria to match the primary factors associated with locating or siting an acquisition. And we've strengthened our continued commitment to monitor local and non-local visitation with regional park implementing agency partners. In the climate resilience section, recognizing that this is a critical but emerging area of council focus, we've added a placeholder for future resources and processes. Moving into planning, which is the main focus of section 5, and therein long-range plan requirements and amendment processes. Over the last couple of years at least, we received a lot of helpful advice from you and our other council committees, regional park implementing agencies, and others. And so what's new in this space? Well, I'll tell you. The long-range plan requirements were reorganized and streamlined into 3 main categories, and simple checklists were integrated into the handbook for easy reference. Plan requirements were reorganized into 3 primary categories or buckets, including engagement, development concept, and natural systems. Design considerations for long-range plans were updated to reflect the direction from Imagine 2050, including expanded multimodal access, context-sensitive and nature-based approaches, and uplifting community connections to the outdoors. And this section was elevated in the handbook space. In addition, the planning handbook includes criteria and processes for 3 different types of long-range plan amendments, including a full amendment, a focused amendment, and the administrative process for minor amendments. As part of this work, the handbook includes clarified criteria and processes for boundary adjustments. This includes connecting the range of amendments to boundary adjustment thresholds. Finally, the language on joint powers agreements is now included in the planning handbook. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tracy.
Ms. Canty, welcome.
Thanks, Colin. On to Section 6, System Protection. This section speaks to the ways that the Met Council protects public investment in the Regional Parks and Trails policy, Regional Parks and Trails system. Sorry about that. So what's new? We added procedural and contextual language related to local comprehensive plans, land conversions, and the telecommunication telecommunications towers placement. And this language was updated and clarified and reoriented to 2050 policies. And secondly, we added process graphics related to the land conversion process for clarity primarily. Section 7, recreation facilities and programming. This is the last section of the planning handbook. New items for this section include procedural language and graphics describing the process to elevate and add new recreational activities and facilities. Desired outcome examples for actions 1 through 4 was added. This was in the policy plan and it was moved back to the planning handbook. And lastly, this section includes the Met Council's commitment to continue trail system coordination and through its work groups. So this wraps up the content within the planning handbook. So the proposed action before the Met Council is that, 1, to establish the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook as the administrative guide for the Regional Parks and Trails long-range planning requirements. 2, adopt the attached Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. 3, authorize council staff to make administrative changes to the handbook over time, including additions and updates to related tools and resources. And 4, direct council staff to bring any updates that directly impact or necessitate implementing agency action related to sections 3, 5, 6, and 7 of the planning handbook to the council for approval, aligning with any updates to the Regional Parks and Trails policy plan.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
King. Yeah, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Fan, thanks for all the work. I find this really exciting, and this approach, to me, this makes a lot of sense, and I commend all y'all for being innovative and moving in this direction. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The staff have done a great job of not only keeping the MPOS commissioners up to speed on all of this and regularly providing updates throughout the process, but also working with the park agencies to make sure that this is workable for them too. So it's just been a great effort. So thank you to the three of you and Emmett. This is
Thank you,
great.
Councilmember Vento. Is that a motion to approve?
Yes, I was just going to say.
Thank
I would
you.
move approval.
Second, Councilmember Johnson.
And I just want to thank you as well. You know, I have Three Rivers Park District in my neck of the woods, and just really appreciate the relationship you have with them and meet regularly with Marge Beard, one of the commissioners. And so I just appreciate your hard work on this. And I, again, appreciate you working with our local partner and coming up with these improvements. So thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on Councilmember Vento's motion? Further discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Congratulations. Excellent bit of work. 10 minutes, right? On this information item. All right. And it's the 2025 Global Communities Act funding availability and scoring criteria discussion. Ms. Berke's here. Ms. Gray as well. And this is information only. We've seen this a few times. We'll be acting on it soon, February.
Next meeting.
Next week. Next
CDC meeting.
Next CDC meeting. Great. Ms. Berke, welcome.
Yes. Hello, Chair Lilligren, council members. I'm Sarah Berke, again, Senior Manager for Livable Communities here, and I'm here with...
I am Hannah Gary. I'm a planning analyst with Livable Communities. And today we're going to be presenting the fund distribution plan for discussion and approval at the beginning of February. And in the interest of time, I am going to gloss over some things that are in your report in more detail. Today, we are going to be going over the fund availability, staff recommendations for funding allocation in each of the LCA programs. We'll do an overview of the scoring framework that we have used over the last 3 years with some minor adjustments, and review the next steps towards council approval of the final fund distribution plan. And we are tentatively going to be bringing this plan to the Community Development Committee for approval on February 3rd. So there are several grant programs under this larger LCA umbrella, different timelines. Some of the programs are on the same timeline, some of them have different timelines, and this is the slide that I am going to gloss over. There's more detail in your report about the timelines, and the timelines that are here presented to you today are tentative timelines, and we are determining exact dates for applications and calendar dates for when we will bring the funding recommendations forward to CDC for approval.
Yeah. And thank you for those of you who are able to stay a little bit tonight, because we do have a tight timeline where our partners expect to start their applications each spring for our programs. And so keeping this moving tonight is very helpful. And we wanted to make sure you had a chance to ask any questions or give any feedback on the proposed fund distribution plan and the allocation of funding, which we haven't discussed until today. So each year, we look at the funding available from our base revenue, which is tax levy funding, and the calculation is set out in statute, the LCA statute. We also look at reserves that we have available to allocate. And so those reserves are either restricted to specific programs or unrestricted and available within the overall LCA fund. So, this year we have $5 million in base revenue for the TBRA tax-based revitalization program, $14.6 million in LCDA funding, and $1.5 million in LHIA. And we have a restricted reserves balance in TBRA, as well as unrestricted reserves of about $13 million. We typically don't allocate all of the unrestricted reserves, but we can use a portion of them each year to augment and make sure that we're making good use of the resources we have available. So for TBRA, our cleanup program, we've had a lot of demand for this program in many past years. Last year, we did not end up having enough demand for all the funding available, but we have a good amount of funding available, and we know that markets change regularly, and so we're recommending level funding for the TBRA program this year. For the local housing incentives account program, we have just $1.5 million in statute. That has never increased since 1996, so we'd like to add at least $1 million to that program. That will fund multifamily rental projects in partnership with Minnesota Housing as part of the consolidated super RFP process. And although we have very strong demand for that program, we do not have much restricted funding available in that account, so we propose to keep that level this year.
Ms. Berke, you might have just answered my question, but if I remember correctly, this was fully subscribed last cycle, correct?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
More so. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It has never not been fully subscribed.
Good to know.
Yeah. Chair Lilligren, I think they only funded, I think it was 13, I should look at my notes, projects in the metro area out of many, many more applications last year.
Yeah,
If I may just
Councilmember Johnson.
quickly, and why wouldn't we put more of the $13 million that is available across programs instead of, in addition to the one? Knowing that they're always oversubscribed, knowing that we can, it's kind of that perennial, it's not going to go away because cities are trying to, developers, communities are trying to build affordable housing. So is there rationale to not push more into that? Because I think it was on our first lap around, in our first term, we early on put like an additional 5 into, I can't remember which account that was, but.
It's into this account until.
Okay, I thought so. So I'm just curious, again, things haven't gotten any better, oversubscribed, in danger of, projects not moving forward. Is there a way we can up that?
Ms. Berke.
Sure, Chair and Councilmember Johnson, great question. It certainly is a choice that we can make to allocate the funding into the LHIA account versus the LCDA account when we have unrestricted reserves. The reason we've done it this way in past years, I would say the logic is just that we do end up funding many multifamily affordable rental projects through our LCDA account as well. And that account does have a lot of flexibility for cities and for applicants because they're not required to have a one-to-one match by statute for that fund. And so it tends to give them a little more flexibility and reduce the administrative burden. It certainly doesn't mean we don't put that funding into affordable housing in most cases anyway. So it's a choice.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to put more money into it, I guess. That's all I'm saying, so.
Yeah.
I would offer, Mr. Chair, if
Director
I may,
Barajas.
if we,
Get through.
yeah, then you can see the full chart
Okay.
of all the things, because it's all coming from that same unrestricted reserves, and that would be a good place to decide how you want to balance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berke.
Thank you. Yes, and our LCDA account is where we fund 5 separate programs in our current, in our current year and in our proposed continuation of a similar allocation this year. So the LCDA development program and the TOD development program are both some of our highest demand programs, and so where we have a small increase in the available tax revenue, we're proposing a small increase in those programs this year to help us meet the demand that always far exceeds what we have available. The demand for pre-development is also very consistent, and so we recommend level funding there this year. Policy program level funding is recommended because, again, there's increasing demand in that program. The good news there, and in general for affordable housing, is that we hope that our pro-housing awards will also advance some of the same goals and be available to support communities with interest in affordable housing-related policy work. And then the homeownership program, which we're funding through the LCDA account simply because of the administrative flexibility that allows us. Last year was also very popular, and we're recommending level funding at $3 million for that.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
And just
Councilmember
briefly on
Johnson.
that, Sarah, could you remind me again, the types, just a type or two of the projects that were awarded? Is that where it's more likely than not that it's a single-family home that a community has done?
Sorry, Councilmember Johnson, in the homeownership program, yes, we fund everything from, one single family home in one community to a portion of a larger townhouse development that's for sale in another community. It's a wide range of homeownership opportunities.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I think that's where council members maybe, it caught our attention where some of I think the price of the home, maybe I'm in the wrong category.
No, I think it was here, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so, just knowing that, that's kind of the personality of this group where, how, I don't know, what you can do in advance to maybe address what we had brought up that became, we brought it back and I think resolved some of that, but keeping an eye on those concerns from the past as we continue to fund this program. So I'm not saying it very well. I'm pretty
Can you be more
tired.
specific
Yeah.
about the housing that we're talking about?
Yeah, there were some subsidies going into pretty robust, expensive homes, we thought, and we felt that if that funding could maybe be spread across more affordable homes, we could be impacting more families, and we just weren't. And I think it was sent back, and then there were some actual corrections made to that allocation for whatever, I think it might have been Minnetonka, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we wanted to look at the threshold
Thank you.
number.
Yeah.
Right. Councilmember Ruff, did you want to add something?
Yeah, there were townhouses or twin homes that were like 750,000
Yes.
apiece, and that seems unfair.
Right. It sort of is that pressure between affordability and community choice, right? That's what a house costs in that community,
Yes,
right? So
yes. But just be mindful that we brought that up.
it startled us a little. It startled us.
Yeah, I mean, feasibility is not the word that I'm looking at, but, maybe it's just not fiscally, it's not our choice.
Maybe better investment somewhere else.
Yeah, it's too high of a price for us to try to subsidize. I think compared to the overall need, perhaps that market rate is a little bit too high for us to make a dent in.
Right.
And it would absorb too much of our funding.
That was exactly the dynamic around the debate last cycle. Ms. Berkey, did you want to add something there?
Sure, council members, I think your question is a really important one about the cost per unit of construction. I will say that in multifamily projects, we don't typically look at that metric, and you may be surprised at how high that is as well. Single-family homes, construction prices across the board have gone up a lot, and it's been very difficult for developers to make budgets work for multifamily projects, for commercial projects, for homeownership. And so I think it's worthy of more study, and there's a lot of data we can look at to better understand that. With the homeownership projects, we do tend to fund a bigger portion of the total project with our grant program. And I think there are some pros and cons to that. We have a lot more influence in the project getting built. And because of the overall budget of the project is smaller for one house than for a larger project, it's just a very different dynamic.
Thank you, Ms. Berke. And I have requesting the floor, Councilmember Wolf, then Councilmember Chambliss. But I do want to just kind of lift up something that you just said, Sarah. And that is when we looked at it, because these two townhomes had such a big ticket, right, a big base price. But as you just pointed out, if we looked at every unit that we're supporting, it might not be quite as out of line, right? So interesting point. Councilmember Wolf, then Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That doesn't surprise me, and that has been a concern for me as well. We have a somewhat dysfunctional system of financing and constructing affordable housing where the units can frequently cost twice as much as a market rate unit to construct. And while that's not the topic of discussion today, it is an area that we should be working on as a region and a state, trying to make that a better system rather than just never-ending subsidies for an inefficient system.
I concur. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and agree that with you, Sarah, that we should look at it further. And I mean, having a single threshold amount isn't necessarily going to make sense when the market is changing and rising so quickly either. I don't know if, but we need to look at it. So,
Agreed.
Mr.
that's
Chair,
the point.
Yeah,
you're
Councilmember
welcome
Johnson.
for the rabbit hole.
What's that? Rabbit hole.
So much for our 10-minute
I want to say about 50
discussions.
things.
And I was just,
Mr.
no,
Ingersoll.
that's why I just wanted to,
What's
you know,
that?
we said 10 minutes for staff.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I just wanted, you know, to make the point that this is what we'll be talking about when we talk about this money, I think, so.
For sure. Ms. Berke.
Okay, where were we? So those are the 5 LCDA account programs. And again, the overall strategy this year is to keep things pretty consistent with past years so that we have a chance to discuss some changes consistent with our broader set of conversations that you have all been part of and contributed a lot of helpful feedback to. The LCDA TOD program is specifically designed to support development in key TOD areas. So we've updated our map. I believe this is not the updated map. So just so you know, we will be updating the map before we bring you the final business item. And so this final chart shows the overall funding allocation. I don't have last year's presented for comparison, but you'll note it's very, very similar to last year's. And then Hannah can talk more about criteria.
So the staff report that you have includes a detailed red line and a clean copy of all proposed staff updates to the LCA program scoring criteria. And because we're looking at making larger changes in 2026, we're keeping changes to a minimum this year. And we are going to continue to work with council members and keep you informed of the process and bring any potential changes to the committee for review kind of throughout the year, this coming year. So for next steps, again, tentatively, we will be bringing this as a business item to the committee at the next meeting on February 3rd for your final consideration and approval. And if approved, the plan would then go on to the full council on February 12th. And once we have full approval, or once we have approval from the full council, we will publish all of our materials for the year and begin doing outreach to potential applicants. But we have already been having conversations with potential applicants this year. And we are happy to take any questions.
Yes, please. Councilmember Johnson. I'm sorry, Councilmember Carter was just texting me. So. All right, thanks.
Hiding in the back?
I'm not quite sure.
Still have a quorum, all right.
Cool. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so with this all coming forward, thank you for your hard work and your continued hard work. Was the study that we did around LCA and, distribution and all that helpful as we continue to move into LCA and some of the concerns that were raised as far as, funding equity?
Ms. Geary.
Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I think a lot of what came out of the report that the consultants wrote was that we need a lot more specificity, especially when we're looking at setting up evaluation metrics. We want to make sure that we can do a pretty rigorous job of comparing what we've set out to achieve and what we have achieved. And with the current goals that we have around LCA, it's very easy for us to describe the outcomes of the program, but not very easy for us to say whether or not we've met a benchmark that we are hoping to meet. So a lot of the work that we're going to be doing over the next year is working on setting those benchmarks, looking at Imagine 2050, making sure that our benchmarks are aligned with 2050, so that we can continue to evaluate the program in with more of like a data-based approach, looking at both qualitative data and quantitative data. So I think that's a lot of what came out of that report.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I look forward to seeing where we go with this. And again, we know everything is oversubscribed, and anybody at the legislature, I'm sure, the budget's it's not a great year all the way around for spending, but when people talk about affordability, we can't do it alone, the cities can't do it alone, the economy isn't working for everybody, like I say over and over. But I appreciate that we are at the forefront of trying to be the piece of the puzzle that comes together to move a project forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, mystery solved. Councilmember Carter is over in conference room 1A for an online equity committee meeting.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So, she'll be here for a while. So, cool. Any further discussion? Sarah and Hannah, did you get what you need from this committee for tonight?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I think if you're prepared to consider this item at your next meeting, we have what we need. So please let us know if you have any other questions before then.
Thanks. I think it's going to be interesting to sort of finesse this discussion that we teed up. I get it. This is not quite status quo, but we're not doing anything major in preparation for using data to do something bigger in the future. Director Barajas, did you want to say something? You look like you did.
Nope.
Okay. Committee members, anything else? Michelle?
I have nothing.
Great. Good work, everyone. Good work, everyone.
At this point, I do want to.
Oh, okay. I knew you were going to say something.
I do want to recognize just the hard work of Sarah and Maya and other members of our housing team. We were recently awarded from HUD another pro housing grant for, is it $4 million? $5 million.
Great.
So we're really looking forward to using that to help local governments update their ordinances, take out those local barriers to developing housing, and really putting a focus on local government support there. So getting our ducks in a row. And
What's the timeline on that?
well, we just heard last week, so
Right.
so we're just getting all the logistics of grant agreements in place and that type of thing.
So that's good. Good work.
Sure.
Good work, everyone.
That's great.
Thank you. And seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.